Good morning and welcome back to the second day of the Great Lakes International Innovation Summit. I apologize for our brief technical delay this morning. Before we begin, I'd like to once again thank all of our summit sponsors. We really could not have held this conference without their assistance. Our keynote sponsors are Verizon, Menlo Innovations, and Mercy Health. Our partner sponsors, Jumpstart and the U. Our Great Lakes sponsors are the Michigan Business Innovation Association, the NIC, the Innovation Connector, and Innovate Marquette Smart Zone. And our innovation sponsors are PNC and the City of Toledo. And we're so grateful for their support, as well as the support of all of our moderators and our planning committee. It's been wonderful to work with all of you. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Charles Ross, the CEO of INBIA. Over the past 15 years, Charles has worked with communities of various shapes and sizes to build and sustain vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystems. His experience spans across several innovation-related disciplines to include entrepreneurship, business incubation, economic development, and investment management. He's provided strategic leadership for organizations within the public, private, and nonprofit domains, and has directly mentored and coached founders at over 30 high-growth companies. And welcome to the stage, Charles.
Oh, fantastic, Megan. Thanks so much for the welcome, and it is definitely a pleasure to be a part of the conference here, this Innovation Summit in the Midwest. Megan and I go way back, so we previously served together on the NBIA board. I think, Megan, you were probably there from just looking at your bio, 2011, maybe 2014 or so, and really have enjoyed working with you, and just so pleased to see all the great things that you're doing now in the state of Ohio. I am so excited about just the next few minutes here this morning, bright and early this morning with each of you. And I'm excited for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm always excited about the opportunity to meet with and interact with NBIA members. So I'm hoping that we have many members here that are participating in the summit. But I'm also excited about the opportunity to meet with potential members. And so this morning, I'm going to tell you a little bit about just what I'm seeing from my perspective at leading NBIA in the practice of entrepreneurial support, and also telling you about some of the things that are happening with NBIA. And we're always interested in opportunities to interact with new members, potential new members, and just to connect with practitioners and just understand what's going on on the front lines, and how, as a community of practitioners, we can do a better job at serving you. Thanks so much, Megan, for that introduction. Just for those of you that I have not had a chance to meet, I've been working in this space for several years, specifically in the area around business incubation and providing entrepreneurial support. Started in about 2005, and I was actually transitioning from the venture capital private equity space. Previous to 2005, I did a lot of work with early stage telecommunication or technology startups, working in the venture capital space. And 2005 is when I entered the world of business incubation through a position with the Advanced Technology Development Center out of Georgia Tech. And during that time, I also got introduced to NBIA, had an opportunity to be a member, serve on the board. And then I guess it was in 2018, I came on board as the interim CEO. And just a couple of months ago, we released that title, and we removed the interim tag from my title. So definitely glad to be here. For those of you who are not familiar with NBIA, we were founded in 1985. And we're one of the largest communities of entrepreneurial support organizations and entrepreneurship centers, which includes operators of incubators, co-working spaces, maker spaces, and accelerators. And our mission is to really help communities enable entrepreneurs to transform their dreams, and to transform those dreams into innovative businesses that make global prosperity a reality. And we look to do that through 5 major pillars. First of all is through community building. Second, convening. Third, training, research, and then advocacy. So the comments I'm going to share with you this morning is really coming from the perspective of Entrepreneurship Center management. And my objective is twofold. One, I want to establish a dialogue. So I want to share some of the observations and insights in what I'm seeing here from MBIA, but also want to learn more about the challenges and opportunities that you are seeing in your community. And then I want to highlight opportunities that we see for the industry and solicit your help in capitalizing on those opportunities. So to start with the dialogue, I'm going to ask all of you who are participating to send me some feedback through the chat. So first of all, just let me know who's on the call here. And the first thing, just give me your name, organization, what city you represent. And let's see if I can see that on the chat. All right, let me see. Maybe it's on the comment section. Oh yes. Okay. All right. Okay. The next thing I would like to ask you on the comment section is to share with me a couple of things. Three questions. One, tell me about what you're really looking forward to in the next 12 to 18 months. What really excites you? Okay, I see a comment from Lamont. Hey, Lamont, good to see you. Urban Accelerator. Sandra, great. So tell me what you're looking forward to. Next, give me a sense of what do you see as your top 2 to 3 challenges that you're going to be facing in the next 12 to 18 months. Hey, Tom, how you doing? Okay, fantastic. Oh, Sandra says coming out of COVID. All right, great. And then the last feedback I'd love to receive from you is how can MBIA help you with your work? How can we help amplify your work? So if I go to the next slide and just keep sending in those comments, I'm going to take a look at them while I'm going through here. And this might help me to actually concentrate on certain pieces of the remarks I wanted to share you. So I understand that this is a conference of practitioners from the Midwest, Great Lakes region, but I know originally we were looking to be in Ohio. So I thought that this slide would be very much appropriate. And state of Ohio is near and dear to the heart of MBIA. So many of you may know that Athens, Ohio was our home from a time period of, I think, 1988 to 2008, 2009 timeframe. And actually, no, I think it was actually to 2014. And during most of that time, our name was known as the National Business Incubation Association. And we were residents of the Ohio University Innovation Center. So definitely have to give kudos to some of our founding directors of MBIA. That includes David Allen, who was with Ohio University, and Mark Weinberg, I think David Allen was with Ohio State University, and Mark Weinberg, who was with Ohio University, really instrumental in moving MBIA at that point in time from Pennsylvania to Athens, Ohio, and was very instrumental in recruiting our president emerita, Dinah Atkins, who served MBIA for several years in the 90s and early 2000s. So, big shout out to Ohio and the state of Ohio for really supporting the growth of MBIA and our mission. Take you to the next slide. And so let me provide just a little context for the observations that I'm going to share. So currently right now for MBIA, we're a network of about 400 organizational members, about 1,000 professionals, and we are represented in about every state in over 30 countries. And while you take a look at this particular slide and you look at the various attributes, adjectives, words that can be used to describe the work that everyone here on this call is doing, we have classified this activity under the title of entrepreneurship centers. And one of some of the common threads around entrepreneurship centers and the organizations that we're looking to serve is really in three areas. One, we're looking at organizations that support entrepreneurs in a programmatic fashion. So they take a programmatic approach to entrepreneurial support. Another key tenet of entrepreneurship centers is organizations that are using and leveraging a community-centric approach. So they are integrating their efforts within the fabric of the community. They're leveraging the community and stakeholders to serve entrepreneurs. And then the last major attribute is that we look at entrepreneurship centers as organizations that are grounded in sound management practices and standard of professionalism. So I'm going to frame my comments from that perspective of entrepreneurship centers. And then from a time frame, just going to really kind of focus on what's been going on in the past 19 months. 19 months ago, I remember I was on a flight to Boston and looking at negotiating with a hotel for our 34th annual conference. And this was right when the pandemic was kicking off, and we were looking at and hoping that we could still have a in-person event and looking how we can negotiate with the hotel. And of course, you know that since then, our organization and many organizations have had series of virtual events, but I want to share some context there. So back in May 2020, we surveyed. So right as the pandemic was kicking off, we surveyed our community around, what were some of their most significant concerns about the pandemic. And only a small percentage of the entrepreneurship centers were really concerned about any kind of significant layoffs of staff. That was something that was very top of mind for me. And mostly they were concerned about converting their program to virtual. What we've observed is that entrepreneurship centers in general, I think, were very well positioned to deal with or respond to the pandemic. We found or observed that many of our members are not in the most hardest hit sectors. So many of our members are focused on top industries, include IT, bioscience, professional services. Of course, we know the hardest hit sectors. And we were very concerned. Most of our members were concerned about the impact of loss of revenues on their particular clients. So I think that entrepreneurship centers were well positioned. And one of the reasons why is because of the adherence to best practices. Next slide, please. So this graph here, this is a great slide. So this graph here shows one of those best practices that I think has really been instrumental to helping entrepreneurship centers through the pandemic. And this takes a look at the distribution of revenues for entrepreneurship centers by source. So I know that this is a lot of different colors on this slide, but one of the best practices is around diversification of revenue. And what you'll see is I think there's 11 or 12 different columns here that represent various revenue sources. And you'll see that the majority of revenue sources are coming from membership and rent fees, but you see a diversity there. So we were definitely encouraged by that. But one of the things that we were very concerned is if you look probably like 7th to 9th bar over from the left, that local and state governments are a major source of funding for entrepreneurship centers. And so back in the summer of 2020, we were hearing from various of managers of state budgets that just about every state was looking at cuts in their budgets from anywhere from a couple of percentage points to over 30 percentage points. We were very concerned that those cuts would quickly ripple to entrepreneurship centers. In fact, for the state of Ohio, I think their FY21 budget started off with the tax revenues that they were estimating started off to be 24 billion. In the midst of the pandemic, they had an estimate of that decreasing by about 10% to 22 billion. As you know, that the experience or what we experienced was not as worse as what we were expecting. And specifically for the state of Ohio, that FY21 revenue ended up being 26 billion versus the 22 billion projection. And we've seen this across multiple states. Clearly, the federal stimulus had a major impact on that, but that was definitely a great sign for us around some of the concerns that we had. So if you take it to the next slide. We've also were encouraged during this time with just how entrepreneurship centers and you here, all of you here on this call responded through the pandemic. And there was the kind of the no-brainer response, which was changing the way in which we deliver support to entrepreneurs and looking at leveraging technology to do that. But there was also pivots and innovation in changing who we serve. And we were really impressed on how entrepreneurship centers were looking to match their activities to the needs of the community. I remember early in the pandemic, CIC was actually looking at how can they not only support entrepreneurs, but how can they support corporate workers that now were looking at working from home and help them with their particular models. One of our board members, Steve DeBretto with the Industrial Council of Near West Chicago, was looking at leveraging his centers for programs around food distribution and contact tracing. And several of our members were specifically looking at how can they support other entrepreneurs beyond maybe technology entrepreneurs and high growth entrepreneurs to include mainstream businesses. So as an industry, I think we did very well in terms of responding to that. Next slide, please. So naturally, many of our members started to think about taking their programs virtual. And when we did a survey around the pandemic, the first question we asked is what actions are you looking to take in the next 12 to 16 months? And so taking programs virtual was the number one response. And so we responded to that, number one, by we had dedicated our next conference, ICBI 35, that happened virtual. We had an entire track that was dedicated to programming, virtual programming and responding to the pandemic. But one of the things I like to talk about in terms of that is maybe we can go to the next slide. One of the things I like to talk about is the power of space. And in terms of that, I know for the history of entrepreneurship centers, sometimes space is kind of taken, has been used as a bad word. I was just in preparation for this presentation, looking back at some history, and back in the early 80s, somebody described incubation as a place where new businesses can get cheap rent. And as all of you know, that we are much more about that. But I think the time during the pandemic is really grounded for me how important space is and place is into creating a sense of community. And as we recover from the pandemic, I think that that is going to be a very key attribute for entrepreneurship centers to leverage. This particular slide here takes a look at answers to a survey that we ask of our members and attendees to our various convenings throughout the year and take a look at what's top of mind for entrepreneurship centers. And you'll see, no surprise, that funding for your clients is top of mind. What I will say is during the pandemic that we've seen from other research sources that revenue for clients actually took a little bit more of a precedent beyond funding for clients. Also saw during that time frame that funding around both venture capital and angel investment stood up fairly well during the pandemic. But then here are the other issues that are top of mind for entrepreneurship centers. How do I assist my graduates? And then number 3, finding funding for our centers in the last couple of years around mentors. At the bottom here, I've just kind of highlighted some of the observations that have stood out through that surveying over the years, ranging from how do we really make sure that we have a great, strong value proposition for our clients. Rural entrepreneurship was pretty popular in 2020. And then 2021, looking at how do we differentiate ourselves within crowded ecosystems. Next slide. So what I'd like to do next is talk to you a little bit about things that we have been thinking about at MBIA. Next slide. So this slide here talks about one of the issues that has been paramount for the industry of entrepreneurial support and for MBIA over the past couple of years. And what you're looking at here is a slide that looks at the rate of new business creation from the 1980s to 2018. And the main issue here is the rate of entrepreneurship, new business formation is trending down. And so that's something that we've been very concerned about. And this particular data is from the Congressional Budget Office. But in addition to taking a look at the national level, we've seen other research that has talked about this being prevalent across most metropolitan areas within the United States, and also across various sectors. That in many of our ecosystems that we're really not doing as great of a job as we used to do in terms of supporting entrepreneurs. The next slide takes a look at kind of what this looks like on a state-by-state basis. This is a new slide for me, and I think it was pretty interesting in coming out of specifically, I guess the source is from the Business Dynamics statistical data source. And I was made aware of this through some work that's being done by the Kauffman Foundation. But what's interesting here is you can take a look at the range of the percentage of businesses that are new businesses for 2018. And it ranges from, I think the low was Vermont at about 4%, and the high was actually in Wyoming, and actually asked me or prompted me to do some work on what's going on in Wyoming, and need to do a little bit more research on that. But I understand that they are very friendly in terms of helping new businesses incorporate and start up, in addition to just providing entrepreneurial support to those organizations. Very similar to, I think, the what Delaware does for incorporating for businesses in Nevada. So those are some of the top states. For those of you here that are here at the summit, you can see kind of in the middle that the Great Lakes region varies from, I guess, 4%, almost 5%, and probably a high about 6% for Illinois. So just kind of gives us a perspective of the work that remains for all of us. Okay, if you take it to the next slide. So in thinking about the decrease in entrepreneurship, of course, we have been thinking about, what are some of the drivers to that decrease. So we've been very interested in, what we can do around funding, and very interested in how we can better connect entrepreneurs to sources of revenues and corporate innovation. And then another area that we've been very focused on is how can we help or how can we help communities deliver the tools of entrepreneurship to more participants within their individual communities? How can we increase diversity, inclusion, in entrepreneurship centers? And this particular playbook is a playbook that I'm very proud of and excited about. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at this. If you have not had a chance to take a look at it, I recommend it as accessible through the MBIA website. But MBIA has been doing work around diversity and inclusion, I would say probably in the past 5 or so years at a very strong level. Definitely have to give kudos to our previous president and CEO, Kirsty Chadwick, on starting us down this road. It started off with, I would say, probably several uncomfortable conversations. Over the years as a community, I think we've been a little bit more informed around some of these issues of diversity, inclusion. And this playbook is a representation of kind of moving from conversations and moving from actions or moving towards actions. This work was funded by JP Morgan Chase, and it's one of 3 playbooks that we have around, what can we do about that downward trend in entrepreneurship. The other 2 playbooks, one is focused on how do you support underserved communities for entrepreneurs. And then the other playbook is focused on specifically increasing entrepreneurship among women. But for this diversity and inclusion playbook is actually organized in 3 sections, and it really focuses on what are the practices that are being used by entrepreneurship centers now that are promising practices in this area. And the 3 areas it focuses on includes engagement and education, which is very, very powerful, programming and culture, and then growth and sustainability. And I think in that playbook, there's probably 15 or so different case studies, 30 or so practices. So I highly recommend you to check that out if you haven't had a chance to do that. Next slide. And this kind of talks to, really why it's important. So this takes a look at the trend of race and ethnicity in entrepreneurship since the 1996 to 2020. And, as you can see that there's been progress made in terms of allowing entrepreneurship to be available to more entrepreneurs, but we still have work to be done in that particular area. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to share these next 2 images, but we'll start with this one here and kind of give you a sense of some thoughts that we've had at MBIA around how we can do a better job with advocacy. And this picture here with this man walking down a metropolitan street, urban street, and with his head in a bubble, it makes me think about where we were as an industry back about 8 to 10 years ago. And this was during a time when we were suffering from a previous shock around the collapse of the financial services industry. And I remember when that time the Obama administration was looking at bringing out a lot of new programs around entrepreneurship. And many models were getting a lot of attention, many new models around supporting entrepreneurs. And many of the players that have been doing this work for a while, many of MBIA members, in many cases, were not at the table around discussion of these new models and new money that was flowing into this space. Clearly, we're at a similar inflection point today. And I'm actually encouraged by the fact that I think now we are at the table for many of those discussions. I actually was just doing some work around responding to a grant opportunity with the EDA and was querying many of our members and trying to get a sense of how our members have been involved in various programs, the I6 program, university center programs, some of the foundational programs that EDA has funded over the past couple of years to support entrepreneurship, and was very impressed by the percentage of our members that had applied for grants in those particular programs, but even more impressed by the percentage of members who were successful in receiving that funding. So I think over the past couple of years that we've done a better job in terms of telling our story and accessing those opportunities. Next slide, though, next image I will share with you, that in addition to the man in the bubble, sometimes we have to worry about that shiny penny scenario. And this is a scenario where we're all always looking for ways to differentiate our programs. And at the high level, while many of our entrepreneurship support programs are looking at the basics of how you support an entrepreneur, there's always a need to make sure that we're telling our story correctly, and that we're seen as that shiny penny and maybe not those dull pennies, and that we're getting the right resources. And why? Not because of our ego or anything like that, but so that we can get the right resources in our communities to help our entrepreneurs. So I'm definitely encouraged by that. I will also share with you, just in preparation for today's presentation and trying to get a little bit more background on our connection to Ohio, and I was looking back at some of the history of incubation and back in the early or the late 80s. And I was coming across some articles that was talking about for-profit incubation. It was talking about organizations that were taking equity interest in their companies. It was talking about they weren't calling it virtual incubation, but they were calling it incubator without walls. And so it just kind of was interesting to see how things kind of come full circle. And while we see a lot of change in our industry, we see a lot of things that still are kind of the basics in the foundational elements. Next slide. So as a wrap up, and really looking forward to the Q&A portion of this, I wanted to share a little bit about what's new and what's next at MBIA. So every year since I've been involved as leading the organization, we've looked at trying to identify a theme that we can focus on, and we try to take that into 90-day increments. Over the past couple of quarters, we've been really focused on how can we build more community within MBIA? How can we help that community to be a vibrant and a generative community? So a couple of things that we're doing there, but the main thing is around these virtual support circles that we have launched. So these are small groups, and the premise there is that we get stronger by becoming smaller, and we through our virtual support circles provide time and space for peers, practitioners to connect and to work with each other, usually over a year time frame in a facilitated roundtable. This is based on some methodology that's used by the Lowe Foundation. We're very excited about that. We're actually going to be starting up new circles at the beginning of the year. If you're interested in more information about that, please reach out to me. We have our eBuilders 2021 that's actually convening on Monday and Tuesday. So next week, Monday and Tuesday, we're going to be convening at the Ohio State University in person. And then we also have virtual options there. I'm real excited about that convening. And we have a special offer for all of you here on this call. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. We have our Impact Index report that we'll be publishing towards the end of this year, early next year. Was basically our state of the industry report. And then we're going to be rolling out a new survey to track some of the compensation issues and trends that we're seeing in our industry. And then our other two convenings that we're going to have for the year. In the January timeframe, we have a convening called our Advanced Leadership Summit. This is really focused at individuals that have been in the industry for a while and some of the more strategic topics and issues that face entrepreneurship center managers. And then we're looking at our annual convening that we're going to have in the April-May timeframe. I have here to the right just a little image here that you can use to scan, I guess, barcode, QR code. So feel free to put that, use your camera to scan that. And if you're not an NBIA member, that'll take you to our membership page and you can learn a little bit more about what all membership entails. We'd love to have you join our community. Next slide. So just wanted to talk a little bit more about eBuilders that's coming up next week. And I'm real excited about this. And for those of you who have not attended our eBuilders forum, as opposed to the annual conference, this is a time where we really zoom in on what's going on in a particular ecosystem and then use lessons, best practices there to enrich our global community, our global audience. And here you have listed some of the topics. For our eBuilders, we actually have our first day that is focused on more of workshop topics. And the morning of Monday, we're going to have two topics that are going to be explored. One is a workshop on angel investing. So we're very excited about that. We're partnering with the Angel Capital Association. And this will be a great opportunity to ask all of those questions that you always wanted to ask an angel investor and get caught up on the latest trends, knowing that funding for our clients is top of mind and one of the major issues. And then on Monday afternoon and Tuesday, we really have an opportunity to tap into the learning and expertise of practitioners across the state of Ohio. So I know we have participants from Dayton and Cincinnati and Columbus, and real excited about that. Next slide. What I'd like to offer for all of you here on the call, there's the still opportunity to register for the conference and to participate, and have a special code just for GLIn2 participants, and that'll give you 25% off. So if you register and use the eBuilders 25 code, you could do that. So the last slide is I wanted to share with you, how honored I am to support the work that all of you are doing in your communities. I think if history is any guide, entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial support is playing, will continue to play a major role in how we're responding to this recovery. Right when the pandemic started, and we quickly moved from in-person to our virtual conference. Our two keynote speakers for our first virtual conference, one was Joe Jaffe and Michelle Royal. They do work in this particular space. And they did such a great job of just setting the tone and creating the challenge that all of us face in looking to address in our particular communities. And they talked about superpowers. They were talking about how all of you on this call are really kind of superheroes in your communities. And they talked about these particular powers, and I wanted to share them with you. They talked about optimism, innovation and action, endurance, inclusivity, generosity, and community. And so I just wanted to share, I truly believe that each of you are heroes in your particular communities, and we're real excited to be able to support your work. So let me, at this point in time, I think, Megan, I don't know if I can bring you back on here, and we can maybe I can bring you back on the screen, and all of the easy questions I'm going to take, all of the tough questions I will give to you. But yeah, would love to get any questions that you might have, and wanted to, again, thank you for allowing me to participate.
We've got a question from Tom asking, are the dates and locations known yet for the 2022 International Conference and eBuilders Summit?
Tom, no. We are, hopefully we're going to have those dates firmed probably in the next couple of weeks. One of the things that we are really fortunate with is the fact that we were not under a hotel contract over the past couple of months. Many associations are really looking at, I don't know, bet the farm issues with how they were negotiating with hotels and with their conferences. So we're looking at now re-engaging back, and we're looking at maybe some other models that we can use for convening. So just stay tuned. Hopefully within the next month or so, we'll be able to finalize that. But in terms of time frame, we're still looking at kind of the April, May time frame for the annual conference.
Okay. And for those of you who are participating in this conference, and if you have not attended an INBIA conference, I cannot recommend it enough. Obviously, having served on the board with Charles, and Charles and I have taught together, it's just really impactful and valuable, and the networking and the education just is not surpassed. It's a very giving organization that really shares best practices and kind of teaches us all how to be better and stronger. There was a comment from Sandra about interesting that the slides show the newness, showing business newness that the Midwest still struggles. This is something that we all struggle with every day. I think that there's just been so much attention and focus on the coasts. Would you like to comment on that, Charles?
Oh, yes, definitely would like to comment on it. So, that's one of the things that I see as the real strong part of MBIA's mission. And I think about our mission of how do we help ecosystems thrive in both Silicon Valley and Boston, but everything in between. And what I've really appreciated over the past couple of years coming on staff here is just the diversity of entrepreneurial support models that are being used in communities. And so I really see our role at MBIA is to help communities understand what are the various models that are out there, and then helping them to match those models to the specifics of their particular community. Mm-hmm. And then also helping to connect practitioners to, what are the various different ways in which you can then implement those models, right? So I think about this continuum of engagement, or not engagement, but maybe strategy / tactics, where you can go everywhere from do it yourself, DIY, to, looking at buying something off the shelf. And so at NBIA, we look to be kind of the place in which you can get exposure to all of those options. But really the main thing is from the perspective of practitioners is really what we focus on.
Absolutely. Well, I will encourage the audience, please put questions in the comment box. But since I don't see another new question there, I'm wondering if throughout the pandemic and working with the membership, have you seen consolidation happen of programs, whether they're collaborating or did they just integrate, or is that not a trend that you were seeing?
So I have seen some of it, but not as much as I thought we would experience. Mm-hmm. And again, I think it's because just some of the best practices that our members have been focused on. Mm-hmm. What I will say is one of the things that we've been spending a lot of time on recently has been around this whole movement of entrepreneurial ecosystem building. Mm-hmm. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And over the past 5 to 6 years, many of the stakeholders in this space, and this is really kind of in response to that declining trend of entrepreneurship, have been looking at, can we be thinking about entrepreneurship in a different way? And do we need to be thinking about entrepreneurship as a collection of systems, as an ecosystem? And, many of us have recognized that fact for years as we've done this work in our communities. And, we primarily provide entrepreneurial support, but to the extent that we need to work with other stakeholders, we have. I know that a common phrase I've heard when I entered the industry was that, entrepreneurship is a team sport kind of thing, and it applies on a community basis. But what I will say is that there's definitely a movement around different competencies and tactics that are necessary to help ecosystems at the systems level. And NBIA has been very involved in how we can help our community of practitioners play in that space. So the way I think about it is, in your particular community, in some cases, there may not be a need for you to play a ecosystem building role. There may be someone already in that place or in your community that's playing that role. And you're really just like, how do I work within the ecosystem? But then there's other communities where you as the practitioner and really as the face of entrepreneurship in your community are looked upon to be that ecosystem builder. And we want to make sure that our members are really at the table and then have access to the resources to do that.
That's great. We've got a question from the Urban Accelerator asking, what is your drive that pushes you to want to continue to get up every day and help entrepreneurs?
Oh, well, I tell you, my drive is when I have a chance to talk to members, that is just so much fuel for all of the ups and downs of this business, for sure. And just recently this week, I probably in the past couple of days, I had about 5 or 6 great calls with members and just understanding what they're doing to work with entrepreneurs. So that really drives me. I mean, I think the other thing is that what I've seen over the past couple of years is entrepreneurship being looked upon as a solution to many of the societal issues that our communities are facing. I talked a little bit in this presentation about what we can do in the space of equity and inclusion. I think when we look at how our communities can develop, many people see a role for entrepreneurship and community development. So those things, I think, allows us to get up in the morning knowing that we can really make a difference in our communities and society. So that drives us. And then the other thing, I mean, when things come back from the pandemic and you're able to do cocktail parties, you're always popular at cocktail parties when you can say, I work with entrepreneurs. People want to talk to you. Entrepreneurship is in vogue now.
Absolutely. Let's see. Thank you for your positive, active, inclusive leadership at IMBA. It is a diverse community of entrepreneurship centers. And one of the things that kind of came in vogue in the last decade or so was co-working spaces. And I'm wondering, with the membership that you serve, some of them are incubators, accelerators, co-working spaces, others. Were co-working spaces impacted different than the larger full service kinds of facilities that are memberships?
Yeah, so Megan, I don't have really strong numbers on that, but my sense is yes, that many of the co-working spaces were probably more impacted. I think that kind of goes to a couple of issues. Probably primarily, I would say, in terms of maybe some of the diversity of the revenue streams, and that many of the co-working spaces may have been a little bit more dependent upon the rents and membership fees associated with that. And so I think that's why it's so important for us as entrepreneurship centers to continue to cultivate these other stakeholders that are looking to support entrepreneurship in their communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you have any closing thoughts that we haven't asked you yet that we should be thinking about with regards to the state of the industry and where things are going?
Yeah, no, I think my closing thoughts is, again, keep up the good work, and wanted to let you know that Team MBIA, we are here to support you. If you're a member of MBI, or even if you're not a member of MBIA, please feel free to use us as a resource. Reach out to us. We really want to understand how we can better serve practitioners across the space. And the other thing I would say is, as we reach out to the community to collect information on how you're making a difference and trying to understand your stories of your success stories with entrepreneurs, that then we can help tell the story to foundations and to our government stakeholders. I just ask you to answer the phone call, return the email, and just let us to help us to help you in helping your entrepreneurs. So again, I really appreciate this. What a great way to start off bright and early Friday morning. I hope you guys have a terrific rest of the conference.
Well, thank you so much, Charles. We really appreciate all of your thoughts and insights. And again, we will share the eBuilders 25 code that you so generously shared for the discounted rate to the eBuilders conference that's next week. And we're going to take a break as a larger group, and we will come back at 9:15 for our first panel on diverse innovation. And we will see you soon. Thank you.